Hey everyone, this is Rachel over at Moonlight Library. Welcome to my moonlit library. Yes, today we're going to do a little thing that I've done every year, which is plan my Read Harder list. That's through Book Riot, the website they put out every year. There's a challenge called Read Harder, and you have 24 prompts to complete throughout the year that kind of challenge your reading and make you read outside of your bubble, usually. I mean, some of them obviously are going to be inside of your bubble, but they just give you kind of like, okay, go find a book that does this or this. So I've always thought that was really interesting and fun. I only completed it, I think, in 2018. 2019, I probably only got like 13 books done out of the 24. This year, I'm at like 17 or 18, so I'm like feeling good. But in December, they put out the 2021 list, so let's plan together what I will read. aka I've already planned it, but tell me if you have any other suggestions throughout. Like, let me know if you're like, wait a second, prompt number 4 would work for this. So this is kind of just a part 1, so it's going to be prompts 1 through 12, since there's so many books to talk about, so much time. And I'm like, let's make it a part 1, part 2 sort of series and have some fun. Nextly, over there, so I will suggest books for ones that I've read books in those prompts. You'll see that I haven't read many books in these prompts because these are very specific, and sometimes it's hard, you know. This is the reason I do this list, is so that I do diversify my reading and kind of have fun at the same time. I read diversely no matter what. I try to, at least, but this kind of helps that happen. Okay. So the first question is going to be, read a book that you've been intimidated to read. Read a book that you've been intimidated to read. Okay. There are a lot of books I've been intimidated to read. I only have a couple of these, like, personally that I've already bought. So I'll show you that. One of them is going to be 1Q84 by Haruki Murakami. This book is a giant. It's enormous. It feels like a sack of bricks. It's really messed up. Obviously, other people have read this. This was kind of passed around my family for a while, and then just kind of ended at me. And I haven't read it, and I've heard it's amazing. I think that it's kind of like, it means like first quarter, 84 days. I know it's magical realism, and it kind of goes into the past while staying in the future. I don't know much about it, but I've read a good amount of Murakami to know that I will probably enjoy it. Parallel existence, that's interesting. Okay, so that's that. Another one for this prompt, where do I put it? Here? That doesn't seem okay. Just put it away. So another one for this prompt is going to be Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace. That one is also enormous. I have this book somewhere, but I can't find it. I haven't been able to find it for a little bit. I have literally no clue where I put that book. So it's like these kids at this boarding school, and they play tennis, and it's very in-depth and crazy, and I don't actually know much about that book. Okay, synopsis doesn't tell me much, but I feel like I had once heard that inside of this book, there's this movie that people watch that just makes them extremely happy or something, and it's really weird and kind of mind-altering. So that sounds interesting. So what I would suggest, though, in this prompt, a lot of people keep messaging me and saying like, oh, I've been meaning to read It by Stephen King. So I think go ahead and read it, because it's time. It's time to take that giant on, you know? Read that book you've been meaning to read. Get around to it, you know what I mean? So, prompt number 2, read a nonfiction book about anti-racism. So, I've been wanting to read So You Want to Talk About Race by Ijeoma Oluo. And this one sounded really interesting to me. I follow her on Instagram, and I don't know, I'm very intrigued by her life, so I would like to read her book specifically. Another one that I'd like to read is How to Be Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. I've heard wonderful things about that one as well. I haven't read an anti-racism book specifically. I've read memoirs about race and like people and like racial injustice and stuff like that happen to people personally, but not just like about anti-racism as a whole. Also, I just typically don't read much nonfiction, so this is kind of one of the reasons that I do these challenges, is so that I can broaden my reading. I mean, I could on my own as well, but I just typically pick up a fiction book. You know what I mean? So the third prompt is going to be, I'm reading off my computer just so we know. Read a nonfiction, read a non-European novel in translation. And I feel like this one is kind of easy. There are a lot of places that aren't European that have translated novels, and I've read a good amount of translated novels. I'm right now reading, this would be a good time to hold up a book, but I can't because it's in the other room. Fever Dream by Samanta Schweblin. Sorry, that is a tongue twister for me. And that has been so good so far. I've really been enjoying it. It's been taking me a little while, but it's an interesting read. She's Argentinian. Fever Dream is kind of like this woman who's like is really sick or something, and she's kind of communicating with this weird zombie-like child. I can't even explain it. She's like trying to explain how she got to this point, and he's almost interrogating her. It's a very strange book. Another one would probably once again be Murakami in general. Memory, Please by Yoko Ogawa is another really good one. It's interesting because this one is going to be kind of like dystopian, weird, but also this kind of like easy dystopian where it feels like everything is normalcy, and it's really strange. I would suggest it for this prompt specifically. What I plan on reading, either Things We Lost in the Fire, stories by Mariana Enríquez. This sounds pretty interesting. It has some authors that I enjoy on the back. Ooh, so it's like characters in these find themselves or in ordinary situations that take sudden and dark turns. That's pretty interesting. It sounds kind of creepy and weird and right up my alley. The other one is Out by Natsuo Kirino, and this takes place, I believe, in Japan, and it's about these factory workers, these women that work in this like boxing factory or something, that end up murdering one of their husbands and like covering it up. Sounds really weird. Some good Japanese crime fiction. So the next one is read an LGBTQ plus history book, which I have not ever read an LGBTQ plus history book that is very specific. Once again, I don't read much nonfiction. So I was thinking about reading How to Survive a Plague, and that's by David France. So that's about the AIDS epidemic, and I thought that would be kind of interesting. It's something that I'd like to know more about and have more knowledge on. Number 5. Read a genre novel by an Indigenous, First Nations, or Native American author. This is very specific. I've read a good amount of books by Indigenous, First Nations, or Native American authors, but I have not read a genre novel by someone. So I have one up there that you actually can't see. I don't know why I'm pointing at it. It doesn't help you in the least bit. Louise Erdrich. I have read one of her books, The Roundhouse. That is not a genre novel, but she does have this other book, Home of the Living Gods or something. Let me look that up. Future Home of the Living Gods. And I know that's some sort of a weird dystopian fantasy novel. In like real world, I don't really know. I don't know that much about that book. I just know it's a genre book. And I enjoyed her book Roundhouse. But what I plan on reading is The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. That sounds crazy. It's like deer antler monster hunting these hunters who are going back to somewhere they hunted before. I don't know, that's a lot about hunting, but that's how I feel, and that's what I want to read. Number 6 is read a fanfic, which I don't think I read that many fanfics, but I have heard about this one. I didn't even look it up. I should probably look that up. So this is called Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality by Eliezer Yudkowsky. As if the first book of Harry Potter is told in a way where Harry Potter is really into the scientific method. So science and Harry Potter and wizardry and like whatever. What? Where do you get that from? That is so fucking weird. Like, how do you come up with these ideas? Another idea is to read 50 Shades of Grey. That is a fanfic of Twilight, so that would work as well. Next up, read a fat positive romance. For this one, I want to read One to Watch. It's like Bachelor meets romance novel. So, I don't know, it sounds really good. I've heard people talk about it, and people seem to really like it, so I'm into it. But what I would suggest is Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. This one I am almost done with. I'm at like the end of it right now as we speak. I will probably be done by the time that I post this. No, that's not true. I'm going to post this tomorrow. That's freaking crazy. Or maybe I will. Who knows? This is a really good book, and I think that everyone should read it. I'm so far loving it as at the end as I am. Read a romance by a trans or non-binary author. So I want to read Felix Ever After by Case and Callender. I've been hearing wonderful things about Case and Callender, and I want to read this book. It's a YA book about Felix, who's never been in love, and you can imagine what's going to happen. He's going to fall in love. He's going to fall in love with someone, and it's going to be beautiful and wonderful, and that's what we think is going to happen. What I recommend as well would be Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston, because that was also a very good book. We're going to take the Prince of England. We're going to take the first son of the United States, and we're going to fall them in love. Some beautiful gay love, and it's wonderful. So yeah, there you go. Okay, next up, read a middle grade mystery. I don't read middle grade books, so this is like a little harder. Yes, my coworker suggested to me because I was like, hey, do you know any middle grade books that are mysteries that maybe I should read? And he was like, yeah, I do. And I'm probably going to go with Down the Rabbit Hole by Peter Abrams. We're thinking mystery. We're thinking Alice in Wonderland. We're thinking, oh my gosh, Sherlock Holmes is in it too. This sounds wonderful. And middle grade middle schoolers doing their mystery-like things investigation-wise. It's also part of a series, so. Number 10, read a science fiction fantasy anthology edited by a person of color. So, this is also something that I don't usually read are anthologies. Just not something I read. I usually just read fiction books. So I was thinking about reading Octavia's Brood, science fiction stories from social justice movements. It's edited by Adrienne Marie Brown, and it takes science fiction, fantasy stories and such, and put social justice into them. That sounds really interesting, and I'd love to read it. And it's going to be fun. I get introduced to a lot of different authors, and maybe I'll find an author that I'm like, I'm going to pick up your book. Who knows? Next up is going to be read a food memoir by an author of color. I want to read Eat a Peach by David Chang. Oh, he's the restaurateur from Momofuku. which I have liked him for a while. That sounds really interesting. I looked through the Momofuku recipe book, and it looked interesting. It's a noodle bar. You got me at noodles. So there you go. I have no suggestions for this. I don't read food memoirs. I just don't. It's not something that happens in my life. Number 12 is read a work of investigative, yes, nonfiction by an author of color. This one is easy. I have not read such a work because I don't really read investigative nonfiction. I mean, I've read a couple. Either Adnan's Story, which is the guy that Serial, the podcast that I've never listened to, was about, in that murder case. So that sounds pretty interesting. Murder, mystery, intrigue, what? Or Black Klansman by Ron Stallworth. And it's about Ron Stallworth, who was a police detective back in like the 70s, I think. And he went undercover to the Ku Klux Klan. That's crazy, you know, and he actually did it. And there you go. So both of those sound really intriguing. And yes, so that's 1 through 12. That was probably a lot of books that I talked about. I'm very excited. I hope you're very excited. I hope that some people join me, and I will be posting part 2 at the beginning of next week on Tuesday. That is the day I will post that. And I hope you enjoyed. Let me know if you're planning on doing this, or if you have any suggestions for my reading plans, to say like, Rachel, why aren't you going to read this book? I don't know, because, you know, sometimes it's nice to get some feedback. Okay. Bye.